Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. First of all, I need to say it's my great honor and pleasure to be here at Al-Rawad 2020 today, talking about developing a knowledge-based economy in Qatar and the Nordic countries. My name is Juha Perälampi. I am the manager of Business Incubator at Qatar University, where we have Center for Entrepreneurship. Today's topic is really close to my heart. First of all, I've been honored to live in Qatar for the past 8 years soon. And before that, my country of origin is, by the way, Finland, and I've also lived in Sweden. So being able to compare and actually understand these different entrepreneurial ecosystems and innovation hubs and how they are similar and different from another is actually very unique. In addition to this, I've also lived in the United States, so I'm able to have hopefully a global view, which I'm today sharing with you. Before we move any further, I would like to actually talk a little bit about what I do, what's my background. So my background really is consulting, coaching, managing, helping out startup entrepreneurs, building ecosystem, incubations, acceleration, etc. In Qatar, I've helped out about 600 startups, and in total, during my lifetime, about 2,500. I also won the most successful entrepreneurship educator and promoter award in Finland back in 2012. Also, I have had a chance to be a TEDx speaker, which is very unique experience. There's translation in Arabic as well. So that's the reason I might be speaking a little bit slower, just in case you are wondering. Very good. So before we get any further, I wanna talk about the Center for Entrepreneurship that I represent. We have a center that's helping out active students, faculty, and staff members at Qatar University. So we are promoting entrepreneurship. We are providing them with training. Also, we do research and consulting sessions. And last but not least is the Incubation Services. So the whole idea is really Qatar University has a community about 25,000 active members. So it really is to foster entrepreneurship and help out aspiring entrepreneurs and just share the knowledge of how this economy in Qatar could be even more dynamic as it is today. So at the Business Incubator, what we offer is high quality one-on-one coaching sessions, a network of fellow entrepreneurs, incubation space, and also access to funding. Some of the most important topics that we focus on are actually business ideation. And then nowadays in today's modern world is not so much anymore about building business plans, it's actually going out there and validating your hypotheses and your ideas. We help out with getting your first customers via sales and marketing. We want to make sure your business is profitable from the get-go, and we look at some of the profitability calculators, income statements, and pricing. And just make sure your business is so it has a sustainability, it has a long-term orientation instead of just a short stint. Since 2013, September, we've coached about 380 teams in total, and long-term incubation, which is minimum half a year, we have about 120 teams, and out of those, over 100 teams actually has entered commercialization phase, meaning they've acquired customers and they're generating revenue. We also have unique events such as Startup Matchmaking Event and Qatar Development Bank as an example. Qatar Business Incubation Center are our precious collaborators in addition to Qatar Chamber of Commerce. So it is a matchmaking event for angel investors, funders, startups, and entrepreneurs. And especially startups get to pitch their ideas to a prestigious panel of business and a governmental institution investors. In addition to that, these startups are actually, they're looking for interns and employees who will be working for them. So we are actually not only focused on investments, but also providing matchmaking opportunities for employment seekers. And this is a great opportunity, especially since we are in a university setting. And the event consists of short pitching, and then after the pitching sessions, we're also providing negotiation modules. So then let's actually get down to the real topic, and that's about entrepreneurship and ecosystem here in the state of Qatar. As we all know, Qatar has definitely become a country of spotlight over the past decade or so. Bit by bit, people are really starting to know, thanks to great companies such as Qatar Airways. We'll be hosting 2022 World Cup. Maybe they put it this way: we are small but a very feisty nation, and that's very similar to my country of origin, Finland. The population size in Qatar is about 2.8 million, and it's about double, 5.5, 5.6 million back in Finland. So in terms of size, we are very similar. In addition to that, something very a combining thing is the fact of how dependent on internationalization we are in terms of exports, especially in Qatar. It's such a diversified group of people who are living here. In Finland, the number is a lot less. So it's more people who actually are originally from Finland. However, the reliance on international issues, and not only in the negative sense, but also positive, is something that definitely brings us together. So in the state of Qatar, people, these are my personal opinions and views, and based on the experience that I've had now in the region. People tend to be very entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurship and innovation are hot words. So people are definitely interested about. They don't necessarily know what it means exactly to be entrepreneurial. Many times, especially locals, Qataris come from family business backgrounds. So it could be that entrepreneurship and being innovative and also trade oriented is in their blood. The way I look at it is we've been now entering entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem 2.0. The background that we have in Qatar in terms of trading, in terms of pearl fishing, pearl diving, and fishing is actually it's built upon. That's what Qatar is basically built upon. So the way I look at it is Qatar has a very unique and interesting past. The last decades in terms of economic sense have been, I don't know if there's been any country in the history of world that has actually spurred so dramatically in terms of GDP per capita in the world. So Qatar has been doing economically so well. The way I look at it is previous decades, since independence in 1971, and even before that, have actually been some kind of boot camp or practice. So then we are ready to actually face the hurdles of the economic success, and that's something that we're doing right now. I still want to talk about the history because I feel that it's so unique for Qatar. Qatar has been at the crossroads of the Silk Road, centuries and centuries ago back in time, and we are in a unique position between basically three continents, and that's Asia, Africa, and Europe. And even if road-wise we were not exactly on the Silk Road, but what comes to maritime, what comes to seafaring, Qatar has been a crucially part of that Silk Road. And now that we're talking about Silk Road, the next Silk Road in terms of what is a big plan from China end, Qatar is a crucially important part of this, Silk Road next generation, basically. So what Qatar has faced is to be, and this is very important, I want to highlight this, is for us to understand that Qatar has had flourishing industries, just like the pearl diving and fishing, but especially pearl diving is a good example of when an industry starts dying out or seems that there's a lot of competition out there, and this is exactly what happened to pearl diving. The great recession or depression of the late 1920s and early 30s actually caused that there was a dramatic decrease in demand of pearls. In addition to that, Japanese started actually producing pearls in a more industrialized ways. So this actually decreased the real demand in pearls. And at around the same time, first signs of oil actually were found in Duhan, first onshore and then later on offshore. So that in a way also spurred the next level or the next step towards economic independency and also, being by the highest purchasing power country per capita in the whole world, which is just phenomenal for a small country. So tapping onto the innovation-based ecosystem, and this is something that is really paving the way for the future. We understand how important oil and gas or gas and oil has been for Qatar, but at the same time, leaders of the country have been visionary to understand that possibly one day either the demand of oil and gas possibly will go down, or at least, or in certain countries, not necessarily Qatar, we will run out of natural resources. No matter what the situation is, let's say within the next 30 or 50 or even 100 years, it's good to get started early. So the question is really, how can we build an ecosystem that is less dependent on gas and oil? And these are some of the aspects that, in my opinion, no matter where you're at in the world, are crucially important. And they include global mindset. Let's start off with the global mindset. Qatar is one, if not the most, and Doha is the most international place in the whole world. We are so used to having different cultures around us. So this is our starting point when, for example, when your kids are born and raised here, whether you're national or non-national, your kids are born into a world that's just like, unparalleled. It's really hard to find anywhere else. So that's a factor that we should understand. The most dynamic ecosystems in terms of innovation are exactly hubs like this. They have a great diversity of people from different nations around the world. And this is a huge advantage for us who are living here in Doha, Qatar. In addition to mindset, of course, we need to have the right type of research. We need to be able to have and encourage our students, and why not also employees, to be better at math and sciences and be able to do required research around these topics. And then number 3 is born global companies. Just like my nation, every now and then I'm making a liaison between these countries. At the end, we'll be actually looking at both of the places, Qatar and the Nordic countries, or Finland in specific. Oftentimes our domestic markets are not big enough so that our startups are actually sufficiently big so they can just rely on the domestic markets. We do have good amounts of startups that are just aimed for the domestic markets here in Qatar or Finland, but more and more so, we should start thinking about, since the get-go, how can we become more international and actually tap on the markets beyond Qatar, the region, and talking about Asia, Europe, US, why not Latin America and Africa as well. That's the starting point. So we are to have more and more born global companies. In order to do that, of course, the quality of our innovations and startups need to be high enough. Then fourth is actually related to the whole global mindset and creativity aspect, and it talks about organic and synthetic growth. So for us here in Doha, to be able to tap on the expertise of nationals, the contact networks, possibly funds what comes to the public organizations and private organizations, but at the same time not to be content with that. in addition to that, what some of the organizations such as QST, Qatar Sports Tech is doing, or free zones are actually luring international companies or international investments into Qatar, so that we're basically also able to tap on the synthetic growth. Organic means that is taking place domestically by basically domestic companies, and synthetic in this case means that we are able to actually welcome and lure international companies into Qatar, whether it's that they are actually tapping on and focusing our domestic markets, or have Qatar as an international hub. For example, their operations in Asia, in MENA region, or even Africa. Then fifth is IP, and this is one of my favorite topics because is really it's a hard one to tackle. So intellectual property, what we mean by that is actually it can be the source of the innovation, the great ideas, the technologies that you may be working on. Of course, unless you want to make an open source out of them, you need to protect them. And of course, this is not necessary. It may not be the right strategy for you, but at least we should be able to analyze whether it makes sense to apply for a patent or any other intellectual property, such as trademarks or logos. I'm sure your business would actually need at least one of intellectual properties to be utilized. But what? That is an important strategy, and oftentimes from the get-go, just to understand how you apply for a patent, whether it's a regional or, for example, US-based patent. How does the patenting system work? What is the price? What are the timelines? And if even not doing that, if you never actually go for a patent, understanding if you might be infringing, meaning violating someone else's rights and patents. So this is really, it's an important aspect of an innovation-based ecosystem, understand how we can cultivate it. And patenting is basically a never-ending process. Often, like, not even big corporations necessarily aim for every single country in the world, because that is a costly process to go through. Last but not least, regarding innovation-based ecosystem, we need to have right kind of incentives. And oftentimes when we discuss incentives, we think about, okay, it's only funds, it's only money. Well, I mean, it is partially. We need to make sure that people who are here in the country are not at a disadvantage. For example, if they want to allocate time or resources towards their own business. And this means that if you are a student or if you are employed by a company, you would have some kind of freedom to operate, so that you would be able to further develop your personal ideas and innovations, so that, how would I say, people around you would be not too jealous about it. There's a concept called corporate entrepreneurship, which is well understood by a lot of organizations nowadays in the world. For example, it could be Qatar Foundation. Another one could be, as an example, Orito. Corporations have their internal programs where you as an employee can actually start working on your own idea, and it will be supported, whether it's time, funding, the internal ecosystem, and eventually leading to spin-off companies. And this kind of incentivizing, understanding how can we spur innovation so that actually everyone in society is benefiting from those, instead of being jealous, actually just paving the way, as I'm mentioning here, paving the way for future. Similar to that, all of us, individuals, companies, corporations, public organizations, can think of the factor, how can we incentivize the future for more innovations. So then building the entrepreneurial culture in Qatar, about 3 stages. And oftentimes I categorize people in these categories, thinking about building an entrepreneurial innovation-based culture. So 3 stages that we should properly identify and serve in the process of enabling someone becoming a successful and hopefully innovation-based entrepreneur. So of course, we have a good amount of people who are just not interested in entrepreneurship, innovation at all. Simple as that. That's okay. That's fine. But if you even have a slightest curiosity towards what might innovation or entrepreneurship means, then we may be considered to be in the acculturation stage. So a person starts understanding what is required of becoming an entrepreneur, receives needed skills, and awakens the motivation. I guess here the motivation and idea are the most important aspects in terms of acculturation. Then with time, sooner or later, that person may move actually towards the ideation stage. And during the second stage, a person already has a feasible business idea or innovation, possibly a team and higher degree of motivation to pursue one's dreams of becoming an entrepreneur. And then third stage is actually the acceleration stage. A person or team members have decided to embark on the entrepreneurial journey, whether it's part-time or full-time, and has decided to set up a business and is willing to grow the business. So based on these stages, we're able to understand what kind of services need to be provided for each a group of people, and possibly funding as well. Then about challenges and opportunities in Qatar. The way I look at, I mean, these may not be challenges. It may be interesting to even talk about high salaries as a challenge, but it may be, if we're thinking about the entity in terms of, I would say that everyone is fighting for the best talent in the country, in the marketplace. So if we say your starting salary is, you're just a fresh graduate out of university and you're working on an innovation, and then there's an organization that's offering you a very high salary for the competency that you actually possess, it may be so that the innovation part of you is actually left behind. So once we consider startups, and we may see that it may take actually a good half a year or even years to start generating any type of salary versus a high starting salary, it may actually be a hindrance. Also, the fact that we currently would, when I compare, and I compare between where I'm from and the US especially, is the fact that companies can, in most cases, be established without no office space at all whatsoever. And I guess during these, dramatic times that we've been experiencing in the past, 8 months or so due to COVID-19, we're understanding the need, or that we don't necessarily need the steady office space per se. So I know there are a lot of, there's a lot of talks, and there's some alleviation in this challenge. But if we're thinking about a startup company, oftentimes employment cost and office space are by far the biggest hurdles. So compared to that, if you are thinking about pricing and you have a high fixed cost factor because of high salaries and high office space, it may be that you may not be competitive in the global market. Then third important aspect, in my opinion, I did discuss funding before, and funding is of crucial importance. Our business angel and venture capital culture is still developing, because we are a pretty nascent entrepreneurial ecosystem, and there's once again nothing wrong with it, because our other industries are so robust. But for the sake of highly functioning innovation-based ecosystem, we should have also a lot of competition by the business angels and startups and venture capitalists as well. If you may, oftentimes we look at the Silicon Valley in California as the all-pervasive place in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation. I don't necessarily look at it that way, but what I really, really highly respect about California and the Silicon Valley is the culture that they've been able to bring about. And the culture is everyone wants to be in that hub, no matter what. There's a good amount of positive competition. They understand the importance of contact networks. People possibly with the greatest minds are going there. So this kind of culture is the key element about the Silicon Valley, and hopefully, and I feel that we're in the process of building something similar here in Qatar as well. Then about opportunities, and by the way, when I'm saying this, it doesn't mean that we're in a bad position. On the contrary, we're in a really good position. But when I look at some of the challenges, I feel that we can easily make it to top 10 in the world if we are, if we are to work on certain issues, and all places in the world have issues. Then really big opportunities for Qatar are actually that we are at the crossroads of East and West. We are bound by so many cultures geographically. Within 6 hours or so, the majority of the population, billions and billions of people, live within 6 hours flight from us. So it's a really big asset. The fact that most of the people here speak several languages in addition to Arabic, English, French, Spanish. You can hear these languages on a daily basis. Hindi and Tagalog. These languages are spoken every day, and Urdu, you just name it. So many different languages around. I mentioned before us being so international. So our starting point in terms of thinking about how to build an innovation-based ecosystem is like up here compared to a lot of places, because our everything is basically around us. We do have enough money around us. We have a lot of international people around us, robust educational system. So I think it's more about just connecting dots in the right way. Also, like I mentioned, I started off with that local people here have a very high business acumen, and that also is seen by just the desire to start a business or engineering related issues amongst other important ones. Overall, I would say just to understand being able to connect the dots in international networks, have the curiosity for people who are coming from outside Qatar, and then understanding how actually people could collaborate together. That can be seen immediately, the high business acumen of people from here. I wrote down no taxation, and I know it's not exactly zero taxation, but coming from a place in Europe where there's a very high taxation, I want to say this: there's basically no taxation. Even if we're talking about VAT right now, and if we're talking about 5%, that is extremely small compared to, for example, where I'm from, between 20 and 30% only value-added tax, in addition to all the other taxes. So that's the reason I basically want to say companies are definitely looking at Qatar for a lot of reasons, including actually very favorable taxation legislation. So conclusions, what comes to Qatar is that diversification of the economy is definitely, we're in it, we're working on it. But also similar change has taken place before. So it's nothing in a way too new. We have all the right ingredients for building a really good top 10 global knowledge-based economy and ecosystem in the whole world. So that really is what comes to Qatar. Then I'm going to move to my other home base, and that's called the Nordic countries. And by Nordics, I actually mean Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland, and Iceland. So they are the countries that actually that can be seen on the map, including their flags. So as you can tell, we are between, I would say, Europe and the Atlantic Ocean, and that's also between US and North America and Europe, and that can be also seen in a lot of times. Our mentality is very straightforward. Oftentimes our countries are very small, so we must speak additional languages in addition to our native tongues. Otherwise, we are not able to do any business. So most our official language, for example, in Finland is Finnish, but due to our historical background, our second official language is also Swedish. And now, but even more so, people speak English. So oftentimes a regular Finn would speak at least 3 languages. In addition to that, nowadays more important are German, Spanish, even Chinese and Russian. So we truly understand the importance of doing international trade, and it has been the case historically. Sweden, Denmark, Norway, actually, and partially Iceland, they share a similar language, but it's still, there are something like dialects. I would say Norwegians understand the best out of all the Nordic nations, each other. So in terms of population, Finland has, like I mentioned, 5.6 million. Sweden is about 10 million. Denmark is a little bit more than Finland, let's say 5.7. And Norway about 5.4, and then Iceland on about 300,000. So in total, we're talking about a marketplace of about 25 million people. We have been, since the Second World War, which partially hit hard some of the countries between 1939 and 1945, ever since these 5 countries have been building the Nordic welfare model. And I'm going to explain you what do we really actually mean by it, and then you can see also the resemblance to some of the dimensions we have here in Qatar. So first of all, like I mentioned, high taxes. That's definitely true to our countries. We have a progressive taxation, so if you make less money, naturally you pay also percentage-wise less taxes. Let's say if you make about 8,000 reals per month, then your taxation is about 10% or less. Whereas once you start making more than 40,000 reals per month, then you can hit 50% taxation. So that's how the progressive taxation is. We still feel, even if we're out paying high taxes per se, that we get good bang for our bucks, meaning that it's worth it. We can still be dynamic. Oftentimes the question is nowadays is being asked, where is my tax dollar or real or euro going? And that's always a good question. So what is provided us with in Finland and Nordic countries is free education from KG through university. KGs may actually charge you a small fee, but starting from grade 0 on all the way to university, everything is free of charge for the nationals and residents. It used to be the case actually that even if you were an international student and you wanted to study in these countries, everything would be free of charge. Even today, they have the fees are very reasonable compared to the UK and North America, and education takes place in English, especially in these international programs. So free education includes free meals, school materials, books, pencils, papers, counseling, etc. And actually, we are being paid. All the students are being paid starting from the university level. So each month, you get a stipend. You get a certain amount of money to cover your accommodation and your basic food, etc. Unemployment benefits are fairly high, 50 to 80% of your income. So we built a safety net system in case something were to happen to you, whether it's you lose a job, you have an accident. In case of sickness, it's a soft fall, so to say. It's collective sharing, so that through taxation system, these kind of people are helped out very much. And this is actually very true also to Qatar. And these are very few places in the world who are able to offer this kind of safety net. And that's because Qatar is so prosperous and has a lot of wealth. For us in most of the European countries, especially in the Nordic countries, where I would say is the most developed safety net system, we need to rely on taxes. Naturally, we also have a pension system. So pension covers about 60% of your income level. So it's something that you can live off of. Of course, now more and more you're encouraged to do your personal investments as well. Free pediatric care, $50 per year. So that's about 200 reals, covers all healthcare for adults. So as long as you pay 200 reals per year, that covers all of your healthcare. Medications are highly subsidized. In addition to that, we have maternity and paternity leaves, which is roughly about 75% of your income up to 10 to 12 months. So as you can tell, our societies are extremely equal also what comes to genders. So we are talking about maternity leaves, but at the same time also, dads can take a paternal leave. In addition to that, each child gets a stipend. So for example, if you have 4 kids, you get a stipend from the government until you turn 17 years age. So what really combines us is the common history. We do share the culture of Vikings, and I would say if you imagine Vikings, fairly aggressive and conquerors, and the question could be like what has happened over the years that we've actually become so, how to say, mellow or equally oriented or nurturing oriented, even partially feminine cultures. That's a good question, but I think we've walked the road of the hardships, and we've understood that the only way to actually progress is through diplomacy and investing in education and healthcare and collaboration. Our societies offer fairly high income on a global level, but remember there's this side of on one hand taxation, and on the other hand, then the handouts from the government. So that's the reason sometimes it's really hard to compare if you just look at what is your salary in Finland, what's your salary in the UK, what's your salary in Qatar, because these handouts and deductions also matter a lot. So really this is the way we look at each other in the Nordics we are brothers or sisters or collaborators, and oftentimes when we are abroad, it's very simple to talk to another person from a Nordic country. Some of the challenges that we are facing lately is of course globalization. It has been a positive thing because we can ride on it. We know how to do international business. Some big companies such as Maersk and IKEA and Nokia, as an example, these are from the Nordic countries, and they're global giants. But however, in terms of employment, also a lot of these companies they've been forced to outsource their operations to countries where there's cheaper labor cost, since our salaries, not our social benefits. For example, if you are to pay a 10,000 real salary to an employee, in addition to that, you need to pay a lot of social costs, including pension and unemployment and insurances, etc. So per head, our employment costs are fairly high, or actually very high. So a lot of companies have been outsourcing their operations. The European Union, which is 25-30 countries within the European Union are actually we have a union where we use, in the European Monetary Union, we use euro. By the way, Sweden and Norway and Denmark, Iceland are not part of it, which is fairly interesting, but Finland is. So it's a union where freedom, to move around in terms of services, people, money is just like in the United States, basically. Also, in terms of immigration, we are facing in terms of how to make sure immigration is actually looked at in a very equal way. And we have been accepting a good amount of people from countries that are not so well off. Collective risk sharing should continue to offer a safety net which helps workers and their families to cope with risks and adapt to new circumstances. This is what the Nordic countries really are all about. Pretty much 95% of the population agrees that a safety net is a very positive thing. There's discussion and criticism towards how big of a safety net we are talking about, since there's always people who are demotivated by factors that, why should I work if I can get the same or similar handouts from the government? Finland has been named the best country in the world by Newsweek, the most successful nation, the Fund for Peace report, the happiest nation, actually 2 consecutive years now, by the United Nations World Happiness Report. And this doesn't mean that we're always smiling and have a fake smile. It's more about that our conditions are are so good in terms of having a balance of life. This means by that we mean good education, good enough salary, the balance between the work and leisure balance, time off, healthcare, etc. It means that people are very content with the decision makers, as an example. So based on that, Finland has been chosen the happiest nation in the world 2 consecutive years. And then also the third most competitive economy, and not this year anymore, by the Global Competitiveness Report. So in a nutshell, Finland is doing very good. The tax burden, as I mentioned already, maximum 50% in addition to 6% social costs. So it can go up to 56%, basically hitting 60 when you're making, let's say, millions of or beyond 5 million reals per year. Significant deductions for homeowners, though, on a taxation system, and also underprivileged. This is the way we're giving handouts, by having tax deductions. Capital gains tax, we have them, corporate tax, and sales tax. So those are all fairly high. They're, in my opinion, they're much more competitive than personal income tax. And the idea is also to lower, just like with Qatar, lower international investments and make sure that the companies and corporations that we have within our country don't go somewhere else shopping around for better taxation percentages. By the way, a curiosity about Finland is do not get pulled over by the cops. So don't be speeding, because speeding tickets may be priced according to your income. So there are, for example, some millionaires, and their tickets have been hundreds of thousands of US dollars, even not over 1 million. And they made the headlines in all the major media. So as long as you do 30 or 40 kilometers in excess to the speeding limit, it really you start paying according to your income. So especially if you're well off, don't get pulled over. The major economic and political process paved the way for Finland's high-tech industries and educational reforms. Just like what with Qatar, there has been triggers. There may have been, shocks in the system that eventually were a positive thing and led towards the next level of progression. For example, the turmoil in the Soviet Union. I don't know if you remember or the Soviet Union, or nowadays called Russia, collapsed back in the early 90s, and we had a lot of trade with them. Actually, about 15-20% of our international trade was directly with the Soviet Union. So that, of course, affected our economy as well. There was a deep and severe economic recession triggered by a Finnish banking crisis, in addition to the turmoil in the Soviet Union, and unemployment hit back then 20%. And back then, we had mark, just like in Germany, they have mark. We had our own mark instead of euro as a currency, and that was highly devaluated, very crucially, and very harsh times. Integration then with the European Union in 1992-95, a membership finally in 95, and then later on in 2009, joining the euro crisis. So the benefits of the Eurozone and European Union really are, if we're part of the bigger entity, there's a chance that we have less decision-making power, but small, or let's say small, our boats are not rocked so easily by external pressures. So our currencies are not hit hard. Our interest rates are very low, beyond 1% what comes to, even hitting nowadays 0%. If you want to get buy yourself a house, as an example. So it does bring a lot of stability, being a part of the European Union. Then opportunities and threat for entrepreneurship. Education has been the main transformer of social and economic development since the 1940s, and is actually ranked as one of the best in the world. And even here in Qatar, we have Finland-Qatar International School. It means really equal opportunity for all. For us, really, there's less than 0% of the students actually enter a private school, and those are mainly in the capital region. Mostly people just go to public school. They're expected to get a very good education no matter where you are at in the world. And oftentimes it's the closest school within usually 1 or maximum 2 kilometers of your house. Almost all teachers have a master's degree. and teaching is a very high status profession, and also salaries are according to that in Finland. Education definitely leads the way to employment in Finland, but how about entrepreneurship? Nowadays, there are questions: is education really? Should we make changes in order it better support entrepreneurship? Well, I can tell you, for example, my experience with entrepreneurship and university. The previous university that I worked for in Finland, you were able to do 1/3 of your studies directly for your startup, and you would have a personal coach who would make sure that you have learned the topics as well as possible, and then you would be credited for those hours. Also, another feature about Finland is really, are you allowed to stand out and shine? Oftentimes we are a culture of not too much standing out and doing your own job and not flashing and not showing off. So that's another question. I think in entrepreneurship, sometimes you need to be, self-bragging as well, or at least utilize social media in a great way. And the question may be, if any criticism, is this the equality principle, the right soil for high growth entrepreneurship? That's something that we're discussing in Finland. So Professor Martin Kenny, University of California, Davis, has said that for about 2 decades, building a successful venture capital industry has been among the central policy objectives in Finland. However, with its high quality, white and blue collar human capital, but small internal market and limited VC industry, actually nice growth instead of high growth, nice growth firms might better fit Finland's profile of unique advantages and social values. So grow, not crazy, like sometimes the venture capitalists are expecting you to, but grow sustainably, slowly but surely. And then Finland's strong points. Well, first of all, very industrialized economy based mainly on free market. We do have good amount of great brands, including, for example, Angry Birds by Rovio Entertainment, Nokia. Significant investments are constantly done in research and development. We've been ranked the 3rd in the world. And even if there's hard times, recessions, we like to invest in education and innovation, because we know that that's the right soil for future, reaping profits. Limited and weak points are our small domestic market, just once again similar to Qatar. We also rely heavily on export. Almost 80% of our gross domestic product is actually from exports. In Finland, it has been acceptable, and this is a funky factor about Finland again, to become rich by winning the lottery or being an athlete, but not by employment nor being an entrepreneur. So as long as you're superstar, like a super ice hockey player, football player, or Formula 1 driver, it's okay if you're rich. That's all good. But if my if my neighbor for any reason is getting a lot of money, and lottery is not included, that if getting a lot of money, a lot higher salary, or rich by being an entrepreneur, it may be frowned upon. It may be a positive thing. Also, these things are changing culturally. New generations are different from the ones who actually still remember, for example, the Second World War, or rebuilding of the Nordic societies after that. Then mindset, we are definitely good diplomats. We're diplomacy and always seeking consensus, meaning that we want to agree on matters. We aim for we're high on problem solving and efficiency. Finland has the highest researchers per capita in the whole world. Oftentimes we're accountable. We do what we say, and we try to be honest in terms of our communication. Sisu, if there's any word you want to know about Finland, it's called sisu. And that's unique for determination and strength of will. If something has to be done, we will do it, no matter how much it hurts you or may require mental stamina. The Finnish dream is not a humongous yacht and a big mansion by the sea. Actually, the Finnish dream, and this is very average, is having a nice house in the countryside by a lake, and possibly having your own land that you can cultivate. And that's really a modest Finnish dream, and that's what Finland is really all about. Older generations has laid the very foundations of the success story, and this is somewhat hard to let go and understand that modern world, that foundations would need possibly changed for the more and more innovation-based global economy. This is in comparison. I took a graph when we're comparing certain mindsets or traits such as power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation between Finland, US, and Kuwait. Unfortunately, Qatar was not on the list, so I picked Kuwait. So as we can tell, you are comparing, there's percentages on the left-hand side, and then there's countries, Finland on the left-hand side, Kuwait in the middle, and US on the right-hand side. So power distance between Finland and US are very similar, whereas in Kuwait and in Qatar as well, the tolerance for hierarchy, meaning that people are okay with the factor that there's there's a lot of decision-making made by the top authorities, whereas for us, it's all about equality. Different parties are actually taking decisions. Individualism is very high in the US, also partially in Finland. So we like to think that, we are doing more individually than as a collective. And we know Qatar, Kuwait are more collective cultures. Group work, group cohesion, family are very important factors. Masculinity in terms of masculine values in society, such as winning, prestige, awards, those are crucially important in the US, also partially Kuwait, a lot less in the Nordic countries. Then uncertainty avoidance, meaning how okay are you with the fact that there's uncertainty in terms of the life in the future. And then that's very closely related to entrepreneurship. So Americans seem to be more okay than Finns and Kuwaitis in that aspect. So these are similarities and differences amongst our nations. Entrepreneurship and innovation creates jobs and calls for global cooperation. Our previous president, Martti Ahtisaari, who was the former president of Finland between 1994 and 2000, and also Nobel Peace Prize winner of 2008, has said, during the next 10 years, about 1.2 billion young 15 to 30-year-olds will be entering the job market. With the means now at our disposal, about 300 million will get a job. What will we offer these young, about 1 billion of them? I think this is one of the greatest challenges if we want to achieve peaceful development and hope for these young. So that's really it. I would actually right now like to invite any questions. Feel free to if you have any comments or any questions, I'm more than happy to discuss those now. So feel free to ask any questions. So someone is asking, how do you think the culture has evolved in Qatar since you got here? Oh, that's a really interesting question. Well, I've been witnessing all the historical events since January 2013. So I feel that Qatar's resilience has proved and grown even bigger. So I mentioned the word sisu in Finnish, and I really feel that Qatar has been showing its sisu in terms of external events taking place. So that's something I feel. In terms of entrepreneurial culture, I feel that it is a long-term process of building an ecosystem. So I think we have been taking right steps, but definitely, like I mentioned before, no ecosystem is ready. So it requires constant work. Thank you for your question. And then how do you think okay, so it's the same. How do you think the same question? How do you think the culture has evolved in Qatar since you got here? Very good. Maybe we got time for one more question or comment, and then we will wrap up the show. Anyone else? So WG, I didn't study anything regarding entrepreneurship or business, and recently I've been very interested in after graduation in 2018. what would your advice be for me? To be honest with you, it doesn't necessarily require studying business. It's the biggest thing is that you have that, that fire in your belly that you want to do something. And then there's a lot of events, even right now online, but hopefully soon we're going back offline again, and we're able to meet each other. So a lot of events are just go out there, even if you don't have an idea or team yet, mingle, network, and you can do all the groundwork right now online, and that's what a lot of people actually are doing. And once you are ready to move on, for example, taking part in a competition, those are also great eye openers for you. So just take the right steps, even if they're slower steps, but forget about the fact that you've never studied as necessarily anything. It's not nuclear science. It really is more about what is your personal, what your personal interests are, and possibly competences, and then how good of a team can you build around you. And one more is anonymous attendee is asking, what else would you like to see from Qatar in terms of growth? That's a fascinating question. I would, like I mentioned before, I just think connecting, there are so many bright things and so many positive things about Qatar. So what we could do is better connect the dots and really create those synergies between organizations, and why not also similar hubs. Just like right now we're building hubs between, for traveling. Right now I saw, Qatar and the Maldives. We could be building similar hubs between Qatar and Singapore, and why not Finland as well. So we could actually help out our startups in terms of internationalization. So that's the way I could, see in terms of spurring growth, and more collaboration between, even more between collaboration, corporations and then startups, by cultivating corporate entrepreneurship. Very good. Thank you so very much. It's been a true honor and pleasure of mine. I'm going to wrap up the show now. And yes, feel free to contact me if you have any further questions at juha.peralampi@qu.edu.qa. And have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of Al-Rawat. And that's it. It's a wrap. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves and stay safe.